I discovered the terrifying rules of my haunted job in the Appalachian Mountains. I never should have opened that door. I should have listened to the locals, those wary glances and hushed whispers. But curiosity pushed me forward as I stepped into the cold, dilapidated office. Dust hung in the air like an uninvited guest, settling on everything. The silence was thick, almost suffocating. My pulse quickened. My routine was usually filled with tedious task sorting papers, answering calls about the ghost tours. No one told me there were rules that seemed more like curses. I distinctly remember the first night the shadow moved. It slipped past my narrow desk, just out of the corner of my eye. I turned, heart pounding, but nothing was there. Only the chilling draft that danced along my arms, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. As darkness swallowed the room, I could feel fingers of cold creeping in. The shadows grew longer, stretching into grotesque shapes, teasing me in the corners of my vision. I heard soft murmurs, barely audible, like confessions barely escaping lips. I could almost make out words, but they slipped away, teasing yet terrifying. Then there were the strange noises, echoes of footsteps in the empty hall. I remember clenching my fists, knuckles white, trying to prove to myself I wasn't afraid. But every creak in the floorboards sent me jumping. I looked over my shoulder frequently, the hairs on my neck standing in alarm. The little trinkets on my desk started to move, a paperclip here, a pin there as if pushed by invisible hands. I shivered, a nasty knot twisted in my stomach. The fear grew. I could almost taste it, metallic, sickly sweet. My heart raced as I glanced at the door, debating whether to bolt or confront whatever dared to lurk behind it. Then came the silence, absolute and dreadful. It felt like a breath held too long, the calm before a storm. And just when I thought I could catch my breath, a loud bang echoed through the office. The door slammed shut, rattling the frame, and I felt a scream clawing its way up my throat. But then I saw a figure, dark and looming, just beyond the glass panel of the door. My body froze. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. My breath hitched in my throat, the figure on the other side of the glass softening and hardening as if caught between existences. It was tall, impossibly so, with limbs that stretched like gnarled branches raking the sky. My heart thudded violently against my ribcage, a frantic plea for escape. The office bled cold, unfurling an icy mist that curled around my ankles and whispered echoes of despair, but I pressed my back against the wall, fighting the urge to flee while everything within me screamed to do just that. The shadow before me shifted, its outline indistinct, flickering like a candle about to extinguish. It appeared to be watching, waiting, and though my rational mind spun tales of exhaustion-induced hallucinations, my gut screamed that this presence was all too real. Dread pooled in the pit of my stomach as the temperature in the room plunged further. I could see my breath misting in front of me, hazy tendrils twisting upward into the suffocating void. The whispers grew louder, forming a cacophony of yearning and pain. They wrapped around me, seeping into my ears, a desperate symphony infused with the anguish of the unseen. Help us, the words slipped through the threshold of silence like a phantom, whispering directly into my mind. I wanted to recoil, but the ghostly siren call held me captive. My fingers trembled on the desk, nails biting into the polished wood. For a split second, I was entranced, entrapped in the swell of voices, pulled into their narrative of suffering. Then, I remembered. The rules. I had learned the first one early on: never engage with them. Never listen. But here I was, teetering on the brink of damnation as shadows clawed desperately for my attention. Suddenly, the figure began to move closer, tilting its head at an unnatural angle, a grotesque mockery of contemplation. I could almost see a face forming within the depths of darkness-haunted eyes that screamed of years spent in torment, a mouth distorted into an eternal wail. In a frantic attempt to break the spell, I grabbed my phone from the desk, the glow from the screen casting a weak halo of light. I fumbled with the buttons, desperate to capture the moment, to document the horror I was facing. But the moment the light pierced the darkness, the figure recoiled, melding back into the shadows with a speed too swift for comprehension. The whispers transformed, morphing into guttural howls of rage that shook the very foundation of the office. Books tumbled from the shelves, their pages sending up swirls of dust like angry spirits released from confinement. The walls began to pulse, a heart beating beneath the surface, alive and aware of my fear. I could hear it clearly now, the rolling thunder of footsteps marching through the hall, coming closer. An unseen entity approached, drawn by the chaos that erupted in the wake of the figure's retreat. Panic ignited within me. I backed away from the desk, my foot catching on a stray folder and sending me to the ground. Don't look back, the forgotten voice of a local echoed in my mind, a warning intertwined with timeless dread. But curiosity killed the cat, and even while I clutched my eyes shut and forced my breathing into ragged rhythms, I felt a magnetic pull drawing my gaze backward. The whispering rose to a crescendo, drowning out my thoughts as my heart thundered like a war drum. And then it stopped. Silence hung heavy in the air, but I could feel it, that oppressive presence crawling closer. I slowly opened my eyes, heart in my throat. In the doorway, filling the threshold, stood a figure, not just a shadow now, but a silhouette bathed in an unnatural glow. Its face was still obscured, yet I felt the weight of its stare like an iron vice. My pulse echoed in my ears as I braced myself ready or not for what lay ahead. And then came the voice, smooth like the fog that cloaked the mountaintops, slipping into my mind with a chill. You opened the door. The lights flickered violently. I barely had time to register the words before the figure stepped over the threshold, a darkness that seemed to consume everything in its path, and I suddenly realized, horrifyingly, as icy fingers clutched my throat, that I wasn't alone anymore. The last thing I felt was the unbearable tightening around my neck, the room spinning away in a hush of shadow, and just as everything faded, a sinister laugh echoed, a promise of what was yet to come. I gasped, drawing in the damp air like it was the last breath I would ever take. My mind raced in agonized confusion, caught between the suffocating pressure around my neck and the blackened reality surrounding me. The figure that had once remained at bay now loomed, a formless void made flesh, and I couldn't shake the sensation that I was no longer its captive, but part of some unholy tapestry spun from nightmare. The harsh grip loosened, and I doubled over, clutching my throat. The muffled echoes of fear wrapped around me like a tightening coil. The sinister laughter still reverberated in my skull, taunting, teasing, as if it were an old friend now claiming a piece of my soul. I gasped for breath, but the cold air bit at my lungs, desperate to siphon away the warmth of life. Then, as if sensing my fragility, the darkness pulled away, as ethereal whispers transitioned into bone-chilling silence, stretching like an unbearable moment suspended in time. That I scrambled to my feet, barely able to stand as I pressed my back against the crumbling wall. My fingers brushed the chill of the plaster. Beneath it, I sensed something alive, pulsing like a heart on the brink of collapse. With each thrum, memory fragments whispered to me from the cobwebbed corners of my mind, stories of those who came before, who had ventured into this relentless darkness, only to disappear completely, their lives erased from existence. Desperate to regain my bearings, I staggered toward the desk, feeling a disorienting pull urging me deeper into the dimly lit room. I had to understand. I needed a semblance of clarity in a world quickly spiraling into a chasm of despair. Searching for my phone, the meager light broke the shadows again, illuminating the remnants of my surroundings. That light was fleeting, flickering, just like hoped. On the edge of the desk lay a notebook, weathered, its pages crinkled. Without thinking, I flipped it open and skimmed the harried scrawls within. Each line was penned in frantic strokes, detailing encounters with the entity now stalking me, like a predator cornering its prey. They come for what you cherish, one line read, sharply underlined. Take heed when you hear their voices. The whispers are treacherous, and they are always waiting. My heart raced, pounding against my ribcage, as I considered the implications. Someone had understood the terror I now faced. Someone had suffered. A flicker of sound in the adjacent hall snapped my attention. Footsteps jarring and thick drummed heavily against the wooden planks, marching in sync with my rising dread. They were coming for me. I slammed the notebook shut, breathing hard. I needed to escape this wretched place. I dashed toward the door, but frozen in that moment was the heavy shadow outside, standing imposed against the door's frame. The faint glow cast by my phone revealed now a silhouette hidden in layers of secrets, an ethereal shroud fanning out like smoke. The figure's mouth moved again, but this time it released a cacophony of voices, torrential and unyielding, blending into one another, rising in urgency, the lament of countless lost souls merging into a haunting chant. Find us, free us. The air crackled with agitation, thick as wool and suffocating. I hesitated but couldn't afford to be passive. The interaction thrummed like a warning bell, urging flight. No, I screamed, clenching my fists. I won't help you. The words spilled forth, trembling yet resolute. But as soon as I spoke, the dark entity morphed, and laughter once more filled the air, a chilling, guttural sound that slithered along the walls like an unseen serpent. And suddenly, before me, beneath the threshold of the doorframe, the shadows deepened. Foul tendrils snaked across the floor, reaching with insatiable hunger, glistening and rippling like oil. Bewildered, I stumbled back, heart racing at the sight of the very darkness itself crawling toward me. I turned, desperate to seek an exit, but as I glanced back to the now pulsating figure, the doorway behind me transformed into an impenetrable wall of Shadowsa tapestry woven from the very fabric of fear. Stay, it whispered, the sound rolling over me like thunder. You opened the door. You must choose now. Panic surged through me as the surrounding air thickened, growing heavier. The shadows gathered like a living thing, wrapping tighter around my feet, rooting me to the ground. I closed my eyes, every instinct imploring me to leap into the darkness ahead. But dread froze me in place, and I was shocked still in a liminal space teetering between freedom and sacrifice. And just when I thought I could bear the weight no longer, the temperature dropped again, frigid breath coiling around my exposed skin, repeatedly beckoning me to the darkness. Choose, the voices bore into my mind like needles. Choose, or you will be lost. The shadows whispered promises of despair, luring me with tempting visions of a sweet release. I felt the icy grasp wrapping around my heart, squeezing, tightening the weight of an impossible choice encroaching nearer. Desperation clawed at my throat, the inevitability of fate looming larger than the darkness surrounding me. But as the last escape of breath left my lips, I felt something shift in the air, a presence that wasn't merely consuming, but waiting, a solid form emerging from the void. Eyes wide, I dared to look, facing the dual promise of the abyss and the figure twisting within. The moment pressed on unyielding, and then, with horrifying clarity, I understood there were no choices left to make, only consequences imminent. And just as the world began to slip away, the final echo of that sinister laughter ricocheted through the chamber, the choice entirely removed from me, and I was left wondering, was this hell the end, or merely the beginning? The chill of the air enveloped me, a shroud of dread wrapping tighter as the figure morphed, growing larger, more defined. Darkness twisted around its edges, obscuring any semblance of humanity and leaving only a grotesque outline, a harbinger of ruin. A sensation of being watched prickled at the back of my neck, each heartbeat intensifying the feeling until it roared in my ears. Choose, it whispered again, but this time the voice was softer, laced with a sickening sweetness that promised relief from the torment I now felt. You have what we desire. Just give us that which you protect most. For a fleeting moment, I thought of the only thing that mattered, the photograph of my daughter, the memory of our laughter echoing through the darkest corners of my mind. The entity sensed my hesitation and moved closer, the tendrils at its feet swirling like vipers poised to strike. Let us take her pain. No more sorrow. Imagine the years spent together, unburdened by grief. The shadows pooled around my legs, binding them tighter, and the laughter swelled, like a monstrous chorus gathering momentum. No, I barked, my voice a thin line that cut through the heavy silence. My heart thudded in my chest, fear mingling with the fierce protection I felt for my daughter. You'll never have her. The figure tilted its head, a grotesque imitation of curiosity. It is not merely her we desire. It is your love, your memories. They bind you to this place, to us. Sacrifice the precious, and you shall be free. Suddenly, the echoes of my daughter's laughter became a haunting melody, sweet yet twisted, intertwining with the desperate pleas of the lurking shadows that writhed against the walls like serpents. My resolve teetered, torn between unimaginable loss and the elaborate prison that threatened to consume me. As terror twisted my insides, the walls around me began pulsating, drawing nearer, as if infected by the very darkness itself. The room breathing, alive and eager. I clung tighter to the edges of reality, straining against the tidal wave of despair crashing around me, desperate to hold on to what little hope remained. "Release me, and I will give you nothing," I shouted, though the conviction in my voice was waning. The very ground felt like it could swallow me whole, with the shadows at my feet becoming an abyssal maw, hungry for my surrender. But the figure only laughed, a sound that reverberated with haunting familiarity. My mind raced, running through every memory I held close, every smile and laugh shared with my daughter. That love, pure and fierce, coursed through my veins like a blinding light. I couldn't let it die. In shock and desperation, I lunged forward, away from the choking embrace of shadows, but was met with the brute weight of darkness, pushing me back towards the figure. "You cannot flee what exists within you," it hissed, voice slithering closer. An unbearable weight settled over my lungs, and nothing but the chilling laughter bore down upon me. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for air. "No," I whispered, battling the encroaching shadows that encased me like a vice. Behind the figure, I noticed a faint glow, an ethereal light that rippled, as if coaxing me to reach beyond it. Was it an exit, or merely an illusion spun from the darkness? The oppressive presence surrounding me thickened, and in that fateful moment, some primal instinct ignited deep inside. I would not succumb. I lifted my head defiantly toward the figure and shouted, "You take nothing from me." The shadows recoiled as if struck, twisting and contorting in fury, their whispers turning to venomous howls. The air pulsated with a fierce energy that surged through me, igniting my very core. In that moment of clarity, I realized that I had the power to fight back. But before the shadows withdrew entirely, they whipped around me with renewed veracity, each tendril connecting to painful memories from my past dark moments I thought long buried. Images of loss, of despair, of every decision that had led me to this reckoning danced cruelly in my mind. They were relentless, clawing at the edges of my sanity. Just as I felt myself succumbing, the glow flared brighter, illuminating the room with a searing light that pushed back against the chaos. I turned, my heart racing as I caught a glimmer of hope, something tangible pulling at me. And then it happened. The shadows erupted, twisting above me, forming a swirling vortex. The figure shrieked in pitch as the light expanded, and I stood at the cusp of that brilliance. The choice screamed at me again, and fear threatened to shatter my resolve. But as I leaned into the light, extending my hands toward salvation, a wretched scream filled the chamber, churning my stomach with its agony. "You will never escape." The figure seethed, an echo through time. In that instant, I felt more than terror. I felt the icy fingers of fate closing around my throat once more. The air ripped from my lungs as the floor beneath me shifted into darkness, unseen hands dragging me down. The voice of the malevolent entity transformed into a void, threatening to swallow me whole, and as the last vestiges of light flickered around me, the laughter crescendoed, promising despair beyond reckoning. I felt the shadows fracture within me, and just as I lost my grip on reality, the only clarity left was the blinding truth. Choices could be damning, but so could moments of defiance. And then the void came. As darkness enveloped me, swirling through a tumultuous tempest of dread, the void released its grip just long enough for me to recognize a cacophony of whispers. They echoed not through my ears, but rather burrowed into the depths of my mind, retracting every layer of coping I had so desperately clung to. It was as if the shadows themselves were calling my name, taunting me into their malevolent embrace. The sensation of freedom slipped through my fingers like water. I was no longer standing, but plummeting in a disorienting spiral, a hollow descent into my own fragmented memory. Tendrils of mist tightened around my limbs, entwining my thoughts with visions of regret and sorrow. The figure loomed larger than life, its grotesque outline pulsating against the backdrop of memories playing like an endless reel. "You cannot escape," it cooed with a voice that resonated with a discordant harmony, each note sharp and caustic. "Choose another way to understand. Your fate is woven into the fabric of this abyss, and relinquishing your light only intensifies the darkness that awaits." I landed, suddenly, not on a surface, but within an echoing cavern. The imposing, craggy walls, dripping with shadowed moisture, loomed like ancient sentinels, pressing closer with every whispered threat of betrayal. The air was thick, suffocating, each breath a struggle against some unseen force. The stench of decay settled heavily in my nostrils, and I stumbled backward, the sharp edges of stone biting into my back. As I gazed into the oppressive gloom, the shadows began flickering, transforming into figures that flickered like dying flames. Faces emerged, their mouths contorted in eternal screams, ageless and agonized. Each figure bore the marks of torment, their hollow eyes accusatory as they clawed at the darkness surrounding them. I recognized some of them faces I once knew, lost to the ravages of time and sorrow. Were these their souls ensnared in eternal anguish, echoes of those who had made bargains similar to the one I was now confronted with? The realization crashed over me like a wave. They had surrendered their precious memories, their very essence, and here they lingered, trapped within the folds of this accursed existence. I had been right to fight. With trembling hands, I clasped the photograph of my daughter, a fragile shield amidst the encroaching darkness. Her captured smile illuminated my heart, a beacon that pulsed against the shadows threatening to tear me apart. In that moment of clarity, I understood. My love was a weapon, sharp enough to cut through the horror that surrounded me. The ground tremored, shaking with the thundering voice of the figure that was slowly materializing behind me. "Your light will extinguish," it hissed, creeping ever closer, its tendrils whispering over the jagged rock like venomous serpents. "You cannot defend what you cannot remember." Suddenly, waves of light burst forth from the edges of the memory-bound cavern. Flickering shapes writhed in protest, the wretched figures writhing under the onslaught. Trapped within that brilliance, I could sense their despair trying to pull me down, urging me to join them in their eternal menagerie of nightmares. I resisted, unwilling to falter. With sheer force of will, I began to chant the names of my daughter's milestones, every birthday, every giggle, every precious moment. As I recounted her bright life, each syllable became an incantation, turning my love into a talisman of hope. The whispered torments around me began to soften, receding like a tide that had lost its fury. "Hold on to those bonds," the shadows whispered at the edge of my consciousness, a warning drenched in despair. "We weave your fate, and your love is ours to claim," but I wouldn't give in. As the brilliance enveloped me, a fissure opened in the cavern, radiating light like a newly forged sun amidst the fog of despair. It was a portal, pulsating and beckoning. I could see my daughter reaching through, her laughter reaching my ears even as the darkness around me shrieked in anger. In that precious moment of possibility, I hesitated. I could interleave this realm behind, but at what cost? The figure, now a haunting silhouette against the blinding glow, darkened my thoughts once more. "You think you can outrun us? Your past will always follow. Your love is a burden you cannot escape." Just as I steeled myself for that leap of faith, a sudden, guttural laugh broke the tension, resonating from the depths of the shadows. "You will never understand," it taunted. In that instant, the ground beneath me cracked, and the light flickered, leaving me brooding in darkness. The shadows surged forth, wild and eager, and before I could react, icy tendrils wrapped around my ankles, pulling me down into their abyssal grip. I could hear the laughter of my daughter fading into echoes, and just as despair threatened to engulf me, a bone-chilling realization gripped my heart. What if she was not the only one I would lose? With one last gasp of air, I was dragged into the churning darkness, the shadows closing in around me. Just as they enveloped me completely, a consuming silence descended, leaving nothing but the whispered promise of the figure. "Prepare for the horrors that lie ahead. You cannot outrun what has been drawn to you." Then, I felt myself falling, spiraling into a void where time had lost its meaning, and every hope felt like a cruel joke. The darkness was no longer an unknown but an oppressive presence, heavy and demanding. Where I landed, I couldn't clearly see a deep void stretched infinitely, a chasm imprinted with the echoes of my fears. I felt dread rooting itself within, creeping into every recess of my being. It wasn't merely a cold shadow. It had form and malice, a sentience eager to collect sorrows. I forced myself to breathe deeply, the stale air laced with something metallic, something that tasted bitter on my tongue. Somewhere in the distance, muffled cries resonated, and I knew those voices were not mere figments of my imagination. They were remnants of souls like mine lost, ensnared in the very terror I sought to escape. With tentative steps, I moved forward, though the ground pulsed unsettlingly, as if it were alive. Each shift underfoot resonated with the tortured breaths of ancient memories. An eerie glow began to illuminate sections of the void around me, and shadows warily retreated, revealing twisted silhouettes clawing against their restraints, desperately seeking the light. Was I to become one of them, bound to this forsaken pit, tears streaking down my face, eternally pleading for my release? I had no choice but to delve deeper into this hellish realm, compelled by an unknown force. My heart pounded in rhythm with the wails, each pulse sinking with the dire insistence that I must not forget why I fought. As I traversed the dim light, the air thickened again, smothering in a way it had not before. I grasped the photograph of my daughter in my hands, its edges crumpled from my frantic hold. I felt embarrassment effusing from those despairing spirits around me and shifted my gaze. Their faces contorted in silent queries of anguish. What would they do for just one more moment, one more touch with the living? Suddenly, a burst of cold air rushed past, and I stumbled back. The apparition of a woman flickered into existence before me. Her pale skin glowed in difference to the encroaching shadows. She hovered, a fragmented figure caught between this world and the next. Her eyes were sunken and vacant, yet they burned with anguished recognition. "Help us," she croaked, her voice a haunting rasp. "This place feeds on our regrets. You must remember." Before I could respond, surrounding shadows hissed, swirling around her like a tempest of smoldering madness. I felt their disapproval, each disembodied scream merging into one horrific demand. "Let her go," they commanded, their once muted whispers now a brutal symphony of wrath. It was a palpable force, pressing against my chest, urging me to turn away. "Don't listen," the ghostly figure pleaded, a visceral fear breaking through her ethereal facade. "They will consume your light, ensnare you with their lies. This darkness thrives on what you fear most: your failures, your guilt. Do not let them twist your love into despair." "You must." Her warning was cut short, as the shadows converged, absorbing her into their depths, her scream unraveling into the void before fading into grotesque laughter. The echoes twisted, warped through the cavernous emptiness, fraying the edges of my sanity. I felt a jarring pull, something sinister urging me to take solace in despair. "Come join us," the darkness beckoned, more enticing now. "Recall your failures. Let the burden of your memories weigh you down. Come dance amidst the shadows." They coaxed the memory of my last argument with my daughter, the harsh words exchanged in anger, the fear of losing her. Just as I braced against that horrific vision, realizing what my heart sought to bury, another flash ignited the shadows. There, obscured in the haze, a bloodied figure emerged. I squinted into the dull light, recognition piercing through the fog of fear. It was just a boy. I had known him long ago, a classmate whose laughter helped me through my darkest days, now twisted into a horrific visage of torment. A creature crafted by grief, tethered to an unrelenting cycle of anguish. "Why didn't you save me?" he rasped, his voice echoing like a death knell. "They fed on your regret. You let them take me, and now you will join me." His words carved a sharp wound, spiraling through my thoughts, undoing my sense of purpose. Was I wishing away my light? The shadows danced around me, eager to exult in my internal struggle. But beneath the despair, a flicker of defiance ignited, a remnant of my love for my daughter battling against the darkness rising from within. "No!" I shouted into the void, gathering willpower to break their hold. I refuse to be like you. In response, the shadows howled, discontent simmering to a furious crescendo. The boy's figure began to flicker violently, dragged back towards the blackened depths, an agonized scream escaping as the shadows enveloped him once more. But as he faded away, a new sensation sliced through the void. A clammy hand gripped my shoulder, twisting the air into a crippling dread. I turned, heart racing, and there she stood, me daughter, her own face now twisted by anguish and shadows, a mirror of the specters surrounding me. Help me, she pleaded, her voice muffled in a haunting echo. You must remember what this darkness is. Help me break its grip. The shadows writhed, growing restless, and I felt myself teetering on the precipice of hopelessness. The weight of my past mistakes threatened to swallow me whole. Just as desperation reached its peak, an agonizing understanding struck met his was what the darkness craved. It thrived on despair, seeking to consume the bonds I held dear. Suddenly, the ground beneath me cracked open, forming a gaping maw lined with shadows, hungry for my surrender. Choose, it hissed, your daughter or yourself. You cannot save both. In that visceral instant, I realized the truth that lay concealed beneath layers of self-deceit. A terrifying decision lurked ahead, one that would etch the final chapters of my fate. The shadows reached out, tendrils clawing for what remained of my spirit, their whispers urging me toward despair. Choose before it's too late. With that, the chasm opened wider, awaiting my answer, one that could sever the last thread holding my memories and my daughter apart, forever entangling us in a web of darkness. The chasm yawned before me, an abyss of despair beckoning with the weight of its terrible promise. The icy tendrils of the shadows slithered around my ankles, cold as death. They anchored me, rooting me in place. I could barely breathe, the air thickening, swirling with the bitterness of lost dreams and cherished moments now tainted by my past choices. Please, my daughter implored, her tone teetering on the edge of desperation, you can't give in. Remember our laughter, remember who we were before this. Her figure flickered as the shadows threatened to swallow her whole, the fabric of her essence fraying like the strands of a worn-out tapestry. What if it's too late? I uttered, my voice shaky, a soft whisper drowned by the crescendo of the swirling dark. Every ounce of my being cried out for her. Tears streamed down my cheeks as guilt gnawed at the core of my resolve. Memories flooding back, her bright laughter cutting through the darkness. The tender moments I took for granted now replaying with an unfathomable weight I'd never known before. And oh, you can't let them twist it all. The shadows shrieked, their hisses intertwining, a cacophony of lost souls yearning for release, still hungry for more. You belong here, forever shackled to your failures. The fear that laced their voices held a terrifying allure, one that could unravel the strands of hope within me. Just as I felt my strength wavering, the ground shuddered, pulsating beneath my feet. I stumbled, barely catching myself on a jagged rock jutting from the earth like the teeth of a great beast. Choose. The shadows blared again, their demands now frantic, thrumming with a desperate urgency, as if time was running out. Join them, or lose her forever. There, amidst the chaos, I suddenly beheld another figure emerging from the shadows. A man, gaunt and wiry, his skin appeared waxy, stretched tightly over twisted bones. It was my old neighbor, the one who had been lost to darkness decades ago. Yet here he stood, spectrally harrowed. You took everything from me, he accused, his voice echoing with the faint timbre of a long-dead resentment. You let this beast into our lives, and you can't even save your own blood. Stop, I cried, my heart racing as a great swell of anger brewed beneath my sorrow. Darkness curled around my mind, filled with every regret, every ill-fated choice I could recall, and yet something an ember of resistance ignited within me. You think I wanted this? That I wished away the light in my life? Then what will you do? He chuckled, a wicked smile forming on his disfigured lips. Save her, or free yourself. The mere thought of giving in compelled a cold sweat down my back. I couldn't let this dark void take her too. I want choose. I can save us both. I blurted out, determination surging through me, to reach for her, to grasp the intangible threads that might join our fates instead of severing them. But in response, the shadows surged violently, a wave of darkness crashing over me, swirling with turbulent rage. Tendrils of malice lashed out as they sought to divest me of my will. "Your resolve is weakness," they hissed, pressing painfully against my mind, trying to peel away the very fabric of my thoughts. "Surrender." With every ounce of strength I possessed, I pulled my daughter closer, summoning memories of love that rang louder than the echoes of despair. "I will not let you claim us," I yelled into the abyss, clutching the photograph, feeling its weight as a lifeline connecting us. But just as I grasped that portrait tight, cracks splintered around the chasm, the dark pulling with a vengeance, furious and unyielding. I was torn between the terror of losing her and the fear of what awaited me if I let go. I remember," I said, desperation lending conviction to my voice, "the warmth of our shared moments, the love that anchored us. I won't forget." Suddenly, the shadows writhed in agitation. The faces of the conscripted spirits emerged, many now twisted in nightmares of their own existence. Their glares pierced through me, bereft of pity, only reflecting the enormity of the darkness that sought to consume. And then, above the chaos, another cry echoed through the void, a different voice, primal and filled with pain. An unfamiliar child's voice, sharp with anguish, shattered into the thick air of forgotten memory clawing for attention. "Mommy, help!" It rang, piercing through the shadows that gripped my heart. Tinged with undeniable familiarity, my focus narrowed. The darkness churned violently, the tendrils wrapping around me, whispering secrets I couldn't comprehend. Another figure, smaller and lost within the shadows, began to take shoppy ghost of what was once vibrant, tugging at my heartstrings, beckoning me to reach out. What was this haunting, desperate plea? My heart raced as dread and guilt mingled, compounded with the emergence of another ghost that craved my attention. Could there be yet another price to pay? The ground trembled beneath me, threatening to swallow everything. I stood at the brink of an insidious revelation. Was the choice before me really about my daughter, or was it about something darker, an echo of the innocence I had neglected long ago? Choose, before the darkness takes it all. The cacophony intensified, shadows squirming with eagerness, intent on claiming me once and for all. The finality of that moment was palpable, and I understood the dualities spilling over from the void. My daughter's fate hung on a thread, but another child's sorrow rang out, haunting and revealing yet unanswered. Unwillingly, I glimpsed the gaping maw of the chasm beneath me, where all choices ended. That terrible weight landed, sinking deeper inside, as I faced the tumult inside me. And then, like a kindling spark, I realized if I chose one, would I unwillingly condemn the other? With a last burst of resolve, I prepared to take that step, but a single shadow lunged from the depths, grasping at my heart with a grip of icy despair. "Don't fight it," it shrieked, the agonizing voice seeping into my very soul. "Every choice has a price to pay." In that instant, the ground gave way beneath me, dragging me into an infinite dark void swirling with unkept promises, threats, and doomed souls. Just as I fell, a scream emerged from the depths of that darkness, a scream that could either be my salvation or my worst nightmares brought to life. Falling deeper, the unfathomable realization shook my heart. In this abyss, time held no meaning, and the choice I made may very well lead to an unparalleled horror yet to be unveiled. As I plummeted through the murky darkness, the insignificant seconds stretched into an eternity. My thoughts spiraled chaotically, my breath rushing from my lungs like leaves carried off by a furious wind. Time was irrelevant in this abyss, and all sense of self was discarded like a discarded memory left behind to be devoured by an insatiable void. Flashes of my life splintered through the corners of my consciousness, cradling my daughter in my arms, her laughter a sweet balm amidst the shadows that now wept with anguish, the eerie, haunted echo of a child's voice calling from the depths, memories of a neighbor twisted with grief, demanding answers I had no way to provide. Each recollection struck with visceral intensity, drowning me in regret and disbelief, all while the chilling silence of impending doom closed in. Abruptly, I neared the bottom of my descent, where the darkness coalesced into a diaphanous mist. Everything, truly everything, was submerged but suffocatingly alive with trembling whispers and cries. Shapes emerged from the shifting darkness, beckoning and encompassing a ragged collection of faces I had once known, grotesque and twisted by their own sorrow. "Help us," they all spoke in discordant harmony, their mouths moving as one. "You've returned to bear witness to our torment. Join us." I recoiled, heart pounding wildly against my ribs. The cold fingers of despair clawed at my mind, lacing with the fabric of my essence and threatening to envelop me wholly. Each face mirrored my own failures, a seething mass of judgment from those long consumed by shadows. "DOUC?" hissed the figure of my neighbor, his skeletal fingers glowing faintly, as if pulsing with some trapped light. "This is what your choices have wrought. Your guilt has awakened us. We are the lost, the forgotten, and the hungry." The sense of dread deepened. The weight of their accusations pressed like a heavy shroud, tightening around my chest. I struggled to find a single spark of conviction, a reason to fight against this tangible void encircling me. But every remembrance of warmth and laughter felt utterly eclipsed by the crushing sorrow that ruled this realm. Then, the ground tremored, and from the swirling mist, an echo took form, the silhouette of a child, small and trembling. "Mommy?" It called in that same anguished tone I had heard before. The voice carried an unmistakable intonation, one that stabbed into the remnants of my heart. "Please, help me." The child wavered within the folds of darkness, illuminated by an otherworldly glow. I could recognize the features, subtle and hauntingly familiar, a reflection of my daughter's innocence before the shadows had claimed her. I reached out, desperate to grasp the hand that extended toward me from the void. "Lily!" I screamed, aware of the sheer doubt settling in my gut as I reached for that apparition. The shadows clamored around me, deepening into turbulent currents of anger that shook the very ground I stood upon. "No!" The specters howled, as if my plea had unleashed a fierce resistance. "She is not yours to save. You cannot hold on to her without sealing her fate." Each wail slammed into me with maddening intensity, plunging icy tendrils of despair into my heart. They diverted my attention from that flickering form reaching for me, making it feel unbearably distant. "Leave her," I spat back, fury igniting as I spat into the oppressive darkness. "Just let her go. Why would you deny yourself?" My neighbor cackled, now a shadow of a jester in this bleak masquerade. "You find solace in suffering, don't you? Revel in it. Own it. Give in." But Lily was not merely a memory. She had become a beacon in this hell, an aching reminder of what had been stolen from both of us. I summoned every glimmer of love and fought against the pulling shadows, straining forward. With every step toward her, the darkness clawed back, viciously lashing out with the feral intent of 1,000 lost voices. Fingers grasped at my limbs, icy and relentless, binding me in place as I strained toward the fragile illusion of my child. A desperate strength ignited as I flung my arms wide, fueled by a hope that flickered against the consuming dark. I will not be defined by my failures. Then something monumental shifted within the void. The earth shook violently, as if the chasm itself quaked in delight at my declaration. Defiance will bring ruin. The cacophony around me shrieked, a tempest of despair spiraling into a vortex of echoes. Words transformed into shrill blades cutting through my spirit. "You think you can rewrite fate? Let her go," I shouted, every ounce of willpower surging forward like an untamed beast. Yet the struggle only pulled me deeper, the ground quaking beneath the fury of ages past me. Voice, yet another whisper lost in the depths. Lily's figure flickered even as shadows tendrilled towards her, threatening to steal her away with a suffocating embrace. "Mommy, please. I'm scared." The spine-chilling surge of her fear wrapped around me, an anguished tether that ignited the urgency to save what remained of innocence. With the weight of the remaining faces clawing at my mind, I roared back, "No, I won't lose you." But as I lunged toward the fading shape of my child, the ground ruptured beneath my feet. A horrific scream shattered the air, echoing from the depths of that darkness, an inhuman howl saturated with rage and despair, summoning all shadows to surge forward. With a gasp, I felt its icy grip embrace my heart completely, squeezing the light from my vision as it engulfed me whole. In the final moments before obliteration, I glimpsed a fractured reflection of my daughter, her form distorted and fading, surrounded by a darkness that sought to claim us both. and then everything went dark, consumed wholly in a shroud of despair. What had I chosen? What had I sacrificed? As my consciousness dimmed, the last sound that pierced the void was the sound of a baby's cry, an echo that rattled my very Korea sound so familiar it ignited within me a horror beyond reckoning, a realization of something buried deeper than I could ever have imagined. The darkness began shifting, and I could almost sense another presence lurking, a forgotten face among those I'd left behind. My heart sank as the whispers returned, promising that the terror was far from over. There are rules, I realized, dark, unspoken laws governing this chasm and its disquieting inhabitants. Darkness flowed like an undercurrent, submerging me into something vile and primal, irrevocably linked to the souls trapped within. Each breath grew heavier, as if the very air around me thickened with despair, a dense fog swirling around. Illuminated by the flickering memories of the lost, as the void inched closer, my thoughts raced, desperately grasping for reasons to fight. What had I done to wander into this hell? Time itself felt surreal, each moment stretching into infinity, craving the bitter ambient silence that wrapped itself around reality. Beneath a shroud of dread, I felt an echo of ancient rituals whispering through the fog, a dark invitation to listen and submit, the cacophony of lost souls distorted, morphing into an agonizing choir. Their cries pleaded not just for liberation, but for companionship in their eternal torment. It surged, an undulating wave crashing over me, a mixture of pain and sorrow, so profound it threatened to drown out my essence. Help us, they implored again, voices intertwining into a haunting melody that was more persuasive than threatening. Help us, and we shall reveal to you the deeper truths lurking in the shadows. Your pain will become our pain, our sorrow will become your bond. Together, we will rise against the darkness. Could they mock me? Manipulate my need to mend what the shadows had unraveled? Suddenly, the face of my neighbor emerged again, his eyes glowing with a hellish fiery, a twisted counterpart to the spark of yearning I had felt when reaching for Lily. Didn't you want to join them? You're destined for this, my dear. He smiled, revealing distorted teeth like jagged tombstones. Do you not find beauty in despair? I reveled in horror, each word wrapping around my heart like a vine malevolently squeezing, pulling me down deeper into the abyss. No, I cried, though the word echoed weakly in the unrelenting dark. I want my daughter. I want to be free. With every assertion, I could feel the shadows retreating momentarily, retreating only to slither back with renewed fervor. You are free to choose, dear one, the disembodied voice of the elder specter said, emerging from the smoky fog. Its form was fluid, shimmering like a mirage, tauntingly shifting. But that choice comes at a price. Whatever it is, I'll pay it. I blurted, but even as those words left my lips, a foreboding dread twisted my guts. Wasn't that what had led me here in the first place? A willingness to sacrifice anything for freedom. Anything can be sacrificed, the specters echoed ominously. But remember, dear heart, you will bear the weight of your decision, be it justice or doom. That I stood paralyzed at the fork my journey had taken. Could I trust them? The anguish clouded their faces as if they sensed my hesitation, like a shark smelling blood in the water. The flicker of hope I had clung to when reaching for my daughter dimmed, replaced by an insidious whisper curling around my thoughts. And then came the silence, the same oppressive silence that stretched before the storm. Every specter turned, their attention shifting toward a singular point within the darkness, a jagged rift that pulsated with malice and despair. We serve a master now, my neighbor prompted, his voice a sinister lullaby. He awakens once more. He will reshape this world if you do not act. Join us, or be forever condemned. The rift began to widen, emanating a frigid light that felt alive and sentient, hungry for my essence. The shadows ceased their relentless encroachment, forming a tentative circle around it, as if compelled to kneel before an ancient power. I could see silhouettes dancing within, a macabre assortment of lost souls trapped in a grotesque performance of agony. Future memories and regrets projected from that void, as if rehearsing the chaos to come to an. I screamed against the tide of despair welling inside. I want surrender. The tremors echoed through the ground, shaking me from my resolve as I felt the echoes of a child's laughter, tauntingly familiar, wisp through the air. How had it persisted in this realm? Reality itself bent the shadows closed in tighter, their pleas turning to shrieks of anger, and the whispers of my future became fervent howls of the damned. The presence from the rift twisted and contorted, revealing a faceous smile both sadistic and horrifying. My dear, do you not understand? You already belong here. You need only to submit to find your home. As the words sank like stones into my heart, suffocating hope began to unravel within me, coupled with a dreadful clarity. The spectral faces, all beguiling, beckoned like moths to a flame, luring me closer to the malevolent warmth radiating from that widening abyss. I stood on the precipice, unable to turn away from the growing compulsion to join their miserito, accept my fate. And as I took a tentative step forward, the ground trembled violently once more, an earthquake of shadows bursting from the rift, spiraling outward in a sentient tide. I gasped as the figures began to spill forth, faces twisted in torment, clawing their way into the world. Souls collided with one another in avalanche of hunger and anguish, forging a path towards me. Before I could react, I was swept into the swirling mass, only to feel icy hands grasping my arms and legs. Their touch was electrifying yet chilling, and all hope began to fade amidst the wails that filled the air, the sound of 1,000 souls escaping their purgatory. Mommy, they're coming for you. A familiar, childlike voice pulled me from the abyss, penetrating through the uproar. My heart stopped as I recognized that voice, a cry cutting through the orchestra of the damned. As the echoes twisted around me, reality shattered. The ground beneath buckled, and before I could discern the impending doom, the rift expanded further, ready to consume everything I had held dear, creating chaos and horror that threatened to swallow the chains of the past. And then, in this culminating moment of anguish, I felt Lily's hand brush against mine, but it wasn't a flicker lost among shadows. It wielded a palpable grip of fear and desperation. The darkness howled, bodies surged around me, and every fiber of my being quaked with the knowledge that I was teetering on the edge of a cliff, not just into despair, but into something extraordinary, unfathomable, as if the rules of my haunted reality were about to snap with horrific finality. The insatiable void howled, and my resolve crumbled like ashes as the chasms opened wide. In that heart-stopping instant, I lost more than my footing. I lost the contrast of light against the dark, but as tendrils of shadow pulled me deeper, I felt an anchoring presence. There was a flicker of my resolve, a beacon radiating from somewhere beyond the rift. And for the first time, I heard a whisper, barely discernible, threading its way toward me beneath the chaos. A voice so hauntingly familiar, yet riddled with terror. Fight it, and I did. But how could I fight when the essence of the abyss was already entwined with my soul? I felt myself teetering at the precipice of oblivion. The shadows swirled around me like a cyclone, a malevolent force pulling me deep into a suffocating dark. Faces from my past twisted and writhed around me, their mouths moving as if in silent screams, their hollow eyes reflecting desperation and fear I had inadvertently created by opening that dreadful door. You will join us, they hissed in a cacophony that sliced through the air, drowning out my thoughts. They reached for me, their fingers cold and clammy, each touch laced with the bitter echo of my regrets, the people I had let down, memories lost in the abyss of apathy. But between their anguished wails, I heard my daughter's voice, clearer now, like a beacon. Mommy, save me. The sound pierced through the dense miasma of shadows, each syllable anchoring me amidst the chaos. Suddenly, I was torn. Was it my daughter I was trying to save, or was she just a figment of my imagination, a ghost leading me deeper into the darkness? Gripped by a desperate need, I screamed back into the shadows, I will not choose. I will save us both. But the darkness surged forward, laughing at my defiance. Control your own memory, or watch it fade. My neighbor's voice echoed through the quagmire, twisted with malevolence. And that was when realization struck. This was my own prison, created by my own failures and guilt. Perhaps my memories were never really lost. Perhaps they had been feeding this darkness all along. Frantic, I clutched the photograph of my daughter, its edges worn and frayed yet comforting against the cold void. I remember our laughter. I remember her smile. As I chanted my daughter's name, memories flooded back, a vivid tapestry of sunshine and shadows. Each memory was a thread, spiraling together to weave a new reality, one that would fight the shadows away. Lily. Panic shifted into clarity as I realized that the darkness could only thrive on my fears, on the wounds left unhealed. I wasn't just fighting for myself, but for all the souls trapped within those who had succumbed to despair and succumbed to the very shadows that now lashed out at me. They had sacrificed their own stories. As I recited beloved memories, moments both mundane and profound, the shadows began to writhe uncomfortably around me. I pressed on, pouring more love into every word, a salve for the invisible wounds. I could sense the darkness shrinking back, howling in rage as the light of my memories clashed against it. Your pain only feeds this abyss. The figure of my neighbor spat, a twisted visage that shimmered with malevolence. Join us, and forget. No, I reject that. I cried with conviction. You will not take my memories. I will not be shackled to despair. The shadows writhed more wildly, their screams forming a cacophony that seemed to vibrate through every fiber of my being. It clawed at my mind, trying to squeeze the thoughts of love away. But I dug my heels in, remembering each laugh, each hug, each moment of my daughter's life. What matters is not only that you remember, but that you choose to let love be your power. I shouted, willing the light of those memories to surge forth. It pulsed through me like a tidal wave, crashing against the walls their emotional fortress had built, eroding the very foundations of their torment. The darkness started to unravel, cords of shadow pulling away and loosening their grip. The voices shifted from screams to whispers, clawing back. You can't escape, it is too late. You already belong to us. No, I screamed back. I belong to love. I belong to her. And with that proclamation, the ground beneath me began to fracture, the darkness imploding into a seething mass, breaking apart as tendrils of light erupted from within me. I could see the faces around me starting to flicker, the tormented expressions transforming as the light consumed the shadows where they had once merged. They cried out, now desperate, as souls once ensnared found windows of hope amidst the chaos. That I want all of you to remember. I yelled out, pulling every tortured soul's attention toward my own radiant truth. Reclaim your lights. And as I shouted those words, they coalesced behind me, shadows breaking apart like pieces of glass, the echoes of despair losing their grip. A thunderous wave of light surged around me, and Lily's voice cut through the turmoil like a song breaking a silence. Mommy, she called, her form materializing amid the brilliance I had conjured. You found me. Just as I reached for her, feeling a warmth wash over me, the shadows howled in anger. The faces that had once tormented me began recognizing their own fading essence. You think you've won? The darkness will always return. But I shook my head, locked onto my daughter's embrace as joy surged through me, disrupting the very foundations of fear that had gripped me. Everyone has a choice. Remembering your love allows you to break free. With one final surge, I harnessed my memories, flinging them into the shadows, igniting an explosion of light that shook the very foundations of this hell where I had once felt trapped. As tendrils of light burst forth, I turned to Lily, her warmth washing over me and filling every crevice that the darkness had touched. But in that moment of triumph, my heart choked with dread. Because buried amidst the light was an unsettling truth: the darkness was indeed retreating, but it would not be entirely gone. Powers beyond mortal understanding would linger, ever eager to regroup and feed on those fragile memories. I held my daughter, but the shadows had retreated only momentarily. I knew then the evil still lurked nearby, waiting to ensnare the unwary once again. And just as I felt the last vestiges of shadow pulling away, a voice whispered through the mist, deep, insidious, and chillingly familiar. You may have won this battle, but I promise I will return. In that brief moment, I smiled. Because despite all the horror I had faced, I had reclaimed my light, and I could feel it blazing within me, a promise of resilience that would echo through every bone, a flame of love that would never extinguish, not for my daughter or myself. But even as hope surged, the last lingering shadow whispered in the recesses of my mind, echoing with a terrible laughter and a dreadful promise. Are you sure you know what you've unleashed? And it froze my blood, because I realized then, as screams from the chasms of the abyss simmered, Darkness may ebb, but it never truly disappears, lurking patiently until the time comes to feed again, just like old wounds, waiting to be reopened.